This is not like any other fight I've been in. There's nothing this kid could do to stop him.
Hello, you're listening to Youbetyah. I'm going to do a recap of UFC 212 just very quickly. Decent fight card prelims, decent prelims on Fox as well. First free bet that we gave out earlier in the week was Antonio Carlos Jr. to defeat Eric Spicely. We did put as well by finish, which is what happened in the second round. There was a much more competitive back and forth than I first thought, especially Spicy on the ground, who has just received his black belt. Although Carlos Jr. being a world champion, being someone who submitted Gary Tonin by triangle, actually expected more off him, or rather less off Eric Spicely, but he put up a good fight. They were in a 50-50 position for the good part of the first round, which did have me worrying at some points, but both educated grapplers, pretty much a stalemate for the first half. And then Eric Spicely shooting in for terrible takedowns as predicted, and getting reversed a few times, and ultimately Junior getting the rear naked choke. Stayed away from a Sunko versus Marlon Moraes for the very fact I thought it was going to go down like it did, either a blowout from Marlon in a TKO, or a Sunko just being his shifty self, switching stances, ultimately confusing. Not the most entertaining of fights, but a Sunko managed to do what he had to do to get a split decision victory. Onto the main card, Eric Silva versus Yancy Medeiros was a good fight, back and forth. Silva doesn't have the chin to compete in these sort of fights where he makes it a brawl. Should ultimately look to use his grappling more, which he didn't. Sort of why I'm glad I didn't bet on that fight. Learning not to bet on fights with fighters with fading chins, because you just can't rely on them. The next fight, Borrachina versus Bangbos. I did contemplate putting this by first round knockout, and I'm surprised it didn't end in first round knockout, so I'm glad I didn't. Borrachina eventually TKO'd him, back and forth, pretty wild fight that was entertaining. Most shocking of all is Vitor Belfort versus Nate, who we did put a prediction up for. Said Vitor was going to win, which he did, so I'm glad about that. However, I did think he was actually going to get Nate out in the first round. Being that beforehand we did look, Vitor was on a 13-fight unfinished streak, so every fight in the last 13 or 14 had come within the distance, and somehow two fighters, not the best chins, Belfort and Marco, managed to go the distance. Pretty close decision if I'm honest, but I suppose being in Brazil and landing a few big shots, Belfort took it. Gedalia versus Carolina in the co-main event. I expected much more. I was also going to go with Carolina, so I'm glad I didn't put a prediction out for that. She was looking good on the feet, but maybe a little too aggressive. Got pinned up against the cage, body locked, dropped to the floor, and didn't pay enough attention to protecting her back rather than getting to her feet, and gave up her position a little bit. And you can't do that with someone like Claudia, who snatched a rear naked choke pretty quick, and Carolina looked devastated because it wasn't the best performance if I'm honest. Now obviously the main event, Max Holloway versus Jose Aldo. Again, I'm glad I didn't put a prediction out for this, because it was just one of those fights where it's so hard to predict. Jose Aldo looked amazing versus Edgar in his last fight. But this was nowhere near the same sort of style matchup, which most people thought of going into the fight, and even more realised when the fight happened, because immediately you could see Jose Aldo winging up with big power punches and I would say kicks, but he only landed one. Everyone said he didn't land any. He did land one in the first round, which ultimately got almost like half checked, got pushed backwards, and just didn't seem confident enough to throw another one, which didn't help him, I'm sure. Max Holloway looking to pressure early, but getting countered by big shots when Aldo was fresh. And I thought it was going to be pretty back and forth. Thought he was going to go to a decision within the first round. Then ultimately they started tagging each other more. But Jose Aldo slowed down strangely fast. He was unloading massive shots. I think the problem is when he unloaded massive shots like that against Chad Mendes, he was noticeably rocked, and Chad would move back and sort of delay the constant pressure. But against Max Holloway, he hit him in the first round about midway through, about 3 minutes in, with a massive left hook that you could see cut him clean on the jaw. Max Holloway barely even blinked. He staggered back for 1 second and then just carried on going forward. And if you keep hitting your opponent with massive shots, especially headshots, it does drain your stamina. It doesn't just hurt your opponent and do nothing to yourself. You're hitting with full force. It drains you, especially if your opponent doesn't seem to react in any way. So he was noticeably gassed after, or noticeably tired after the first round. After the second round, where it was more competitive, Max won that round, or would have won that round had it gone to the scorecards. He started lighting up Junior with just long, straight 1-2s. And then by the end of the second round, he looked exhausted in his corner, and I thought at that point I wished I'd done some live betting, because he looked annihilated. And Max was just getting fresher and fresher, and just didn't seem to. His stamina is just not an issue at this weight, and he's massive for the weight as well. People say, "Oh yeah, Jose Aldo actually had the reach advantage." It may be true on when they measure it, but it did not look like that in the octagon. And Holloway was peppering him from range and hit him with a beautiful 1-2, and then 1-2 again as he staggered back, and the second right hand just cleaned his clock. And some people complain about the stoppage. I don't think you can complain about that stoppage. They gave him every opportunity to recover, and you can't complain about Aldo's chin either. He's got an absolutely granite chin, just hit with massive shots. Surprising, to say the least, in the way the fight went down. You could see Aldo clearly had the advantage when he was fresh, but you just can't fight like that for 3, 4, 5 rounds. Max Holloway took over, and I see him being a pretty hard fight for anyone in the division. I don't even know who realistically has the right to fight the champion now, but maybe Edgar, but he has had quite a few shots. Even Cub Swanson saying that he'd like a rematch. I don't see how he's going to do any better in the rematch, but yeah, we'll see. 2 results that we predicted and gave out for free, both came in exactly as we predicted them. Junior by finish, and just Vitor Belfort was a straight win. So yeah, I'm glad we put those out. Follow us for more, Youbetyah.com and at Youbetyah on Twitter. Cheers.